All right, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. Let's start this conversation. We're calling it the Youth View. We want to hear the young people's views on almost everything that's going on in the country. I'll introduce my guests real quick, beginning from my immediate right. Billion Ojiwa, community activist. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having me.
And on my left, Suzanne Silantoy, public policy expert. You may remember her for the Senate run in Nairobi. She was the youngest to ever contest. Thank you for making time.
Hi, thanks.
Brilliant. Let's talk about COVID-19. Let's start with that and see what their views are. I would like to hear your views as well on everything that we're going to talk about at Trevor Mbija, at Citizen TV Kenya, hashtag Daybreak. How would you have done it any different if you are the ones at the helms of the power that is maybe? COVID-19, Billion, is something that we've been talking about for quite some time. How do you think the government has performed in terms of handling it? Has it been done well? What could have been done better?
Thank you, Trevor, for having me. I think at the beginning there was a challenge, yeah. And we didn't start on a good foot. But all along the way we've managed to to rectify some of the mistakes that we made, that the government made. Yeah. Yeah. So we are seeing a bit of progress. I am just worried about the vaccine. I think we could have had Plan A, Plan B, Plan C. And seeing the people that have been vaccinated, if you're not connected, most people who have been vaccinated are connected. I come from a community where you can, point a few people who've been vaccinated. Yes, yet we have, the high risk people within the community. So it hasn't been fair, yeah. Or equally distributed as we thought. So I'm waiting to see the second batch how it will play out. Yeah. But so far so good. I think we've been able to manage well, and even the daily updates goes a long way into making people know what is happening.
When you say the community you're coming from, where is that? And are you saying that the people who have not been vaccinated, even the ones who are supposed to have been given priority?
Yes, I come from Mathare Republic. Yeah. Yeah, so from Mathare, most people have not been vaccinated. We've not had any even the awareness campaigns. If you look at the community, it's one of the disadvantaged communities. So there ought to be more to be done in that community just before the vaccination, because the theories around the vaccine that people need to be convinced first before they are vaccinated. Yeah. And so we've not had even the high risk, the women, the old have not been vaccinated, yet yeah. We see so many young people taking pictures and selfies with the vaccine. Yeah. So that is my worry. So
then in that place, it's not so much the lack of the vaccines. Of course, there's a very limited doses coming through, but they seem to have a challenge with the information coming through. Because is there some sort of apathy?
No, I think it's both the information and access, yeah. Because if you look at the areas where you're supposed to be vaccinated, they are far away from Mathare. So it's both that access and you're not sure if you go there you'll get vaccinated. And also I think with the vaccine, this is a new thing that is coming in, and some of these women, I remember trying to convince my grandmother that she needs to be vaccinated. She told me she had seen everything. She doesn't need to be vaccinated now. Yeah, so there's more that needs to be done than just vaccination. Yeah, and even those who got the first shots, there are people who are saying, the experience, what I went through, I'll not be able to take my second jab again. Yeah, so it should not just be a vaccination, but there should be more information around the vaccination.
Okay. Yeah. Suzanne, how do you think we performed so far?
First of all, thanks for having me. I think when it comes to COVID, there's mixed reactions to the response of how government has handled this. I think at the beginning there was a lot of panic, but the government took initiative to give us some few reliefs as citizens. So we look at tax relief, we look at some of the disbursements of even cash that were given out to community members, which were good. And I think as the pandemic grew, as the time went on, it became difficult for, understandably so, for government to keep doing this. And so at the beginning of the year, some of those reliefs were actually removed. But the pandemic is still here with us. So that poses a challenge for the citizens and also for government in terms of how it raises resources. And so it's a tough place to be in as a government anywhere in the world, and especially here as well. So I empathize with the space in which government is in, although I do think they could do more, because the effects of the pandemic are really high, with job losses, with pay cuts, and some industries just completely unable to do what they need to do, such as the entertainment industry, to make any sort of ends meet. So it's a tough place that we have been in as a country for the last year and maybe 2 months now. But yes, I still think government can do more in terms of, first of all, taming corruption. We still haven't seen the issues of KEMSA being dealt with. The president himself said that we lose 2 billion shillings a day, which could, the whole vaccination process should have been about 14 billion shillings. Maybe we could have saved 7 days and probably vaccinated everybody. And so I think there's more that needs to be done in that area in terms of dealing with corruption, so that we can be able to do more in this period.
How would you rate the government's performance out of 100%?
I would give them a 50%, a sympathetic 50%. Just understanding the difficulty they're in, but also knowing that there's still a lot that needs to be done to deal with the corruption that could have helped deal with the situation a lot better. In terms of vaccines, again, I think it's still a very difficult position the world is in, especially with the shortage of vaccines. With India going through the difficult wave that they're going through, to, and them being one of the main suppliers of the vaccines that we are using, the AstraZeneca vaccine, that it's a very difficult position that the world is in. And unfortunately, Kenya falls into that space where we expected a few vaccines from India. I do, however, think the government could do more in terms of communicating. Communicating better about, first of all, what is the plan? I think, just as Billen has said, it's quite difficult to pinpoint government communication other than the daily updates that are being done at Afya House. And so it leaves a lot of Kenyans with a lot of confusion. It leaves a lot of room for rumors and misconceptions and myths. It doesn't deal with even the side effects that people who have been vaccinating are facing. And so I think a lot needs to be done by government just to communicate to us what is the situation, what is the plan. And yes, it's difficult to know when we will get vaccines, and we understand that, but I wish the government would come out more clearly just to communicate that to us, help us understand why this is the case. So yeah, I would fault them in terms of communication. I understand that the challenges that they have, but it would be better if they just came out a little bit more to just communicate what their plan is. Also, let us know what the difficulty is, so that we're able to understand where they're coming from.
Billion, how would government approach this any different? Because both of you have somehow zeroed in on communication. Now we understand how predictable this is. It's something that everybody is dealing with for the first time in the world, actually. How best should they have gone about it? What would you have done differently if you're the one at the helm?
I think working backwards would help. We have a 3 or 4 months plan how we want to deal with this in terms of, the schools opening, in terms of, people losing jobs. There were some incentives to caution people. So working backwards would even give room for companies, organizations, individuals that want to support the government. So we all, fit into that work plan. But now this has been a blank check. So we don't know what will happen tomorrow. We're just so spontaneous with everything. I know and I understand that it's not something that they were prepared of. Nobody was prepared of this. And they thought it would last less than 3 months. Everybody thought so. But now we are seeing that this is something that we have to learn to live with. So part of living with it is, having a proper plan, laid out plan that, all Kenyans know that, within 6 months, this is what the government is going to try and do in terms of, the job losses. We come from areas where, all people are now going through hard times. So how do we, you know, try and bring everybody on board and just, you know, sell hope, because most of people are now losing hope because you are uncertain about what will happen tomorrow. So that would have been the different way of doing it. There are organizations, there are companies, you know, with the uncertainty, they keep the small resources that they have. But if there's a plan, we will all come out and try and support with the small that we have.
All right.
Yeah.
Alex Matere is joining us now, convener youth for BBI. I know you want to say you are stuck in traffic, so we'll take that excuse over for you already. How do you think the government has performed in terms of dealing with COVID-19, the search for vaccines? What could have been done better?
I think, from my perspective, the government has really tried in terms of handling this pandemic, having in mind rather, that it's an experience that most governments haven't had throughout history. I think since the Spanish flu, we have never had such a major pandemic affecting the entire globe. So the response, basically, among all the governments that I've observed, doing it comparatively with Kenya, has always been hampered by the fact that this is a virus that keeps on mutating, that the infection curve cannot be predicted. Yes, there are protocols that are trying so much to limit in terms of people interacting and other health protocols that have been put by the Ministry of Health together with the World Health Organization. But you also need to understand that the curve is not predictable, and that's why in terms of government intervention sometimes it might not be actually definite in terms of managing that infection curve. Yeah. That said, on the part of the economic front, I think the government from the outset was quite deliberate in terms of cushioning and also preventing the ravages of COVID from continuing to disrupt the livelihoods of Kenyans, especially the young people who are in various industries. And specifically, the hotel industry has been worse hit by this pandemic. That said, it's also important, and you remember several times that I've sat here, we have always been pushing government to come up with interventions that assist the young people. Kazi Mtaani is one initiative that has actually come in handy to ensure that even those ones that have been pushed to the edge by COVID, at least they can get some stipend for them to continue living their lives normally. And we continue pushing for tax cuts, especially for industries that are badly affected by this. And we continue urging the government that in terms of the tax rebates that they continue to offer for these industries is something that they need to think about even as we go forward, and hope that we can be able finally to take care of this virus.
Yeah. Suzanne, do you agree with the Kazi Mtaani initiative in terms of, has it been impactful? Is there a better way to have done it? Because I've seen a bit of complaints also, people saying only people who are connected get the job, sometimes the money is not even paid. Is this an effective way of dealing with the issues around youth and economic empowerment?
I think the Kazi Mtaani initiative is one way of trying to deal with the issue of youth and economic empowerment. The challenge that I do have with it is that I think such interventions assume that all young people want the same exact thing. They want to work in the same exact way. And they all make this assumption that we will do the same thing. And so they make this wholesome assumption of us being one group, which I solely disagree with. And even these issues of corruption and issues of having to know someone to be able to work in this space has been a challenge that I think needs to be addressed a little bit more, so that more young people are able to benefit from this. It's good to also see the government doing various interventions, such as the internships that the government offers for specific industries. I think that's a good initiative that government is taking in diversifying the interventions of youth economic empowerment. In terms of looking at whether or not these things are effective, I think that's a gap that is there in government. We've done quite a number of interventions as young people, for young people, and it barely is put on the spot to be evaluated just to see what kind of impact it has. If you look at the youth fund that had been rolled out for, I think, about 8 years or 9, there's no single report that tells us, okay, so who are these people who are given this resources? What is the progress? Have they started small businesses? How are those small businesses doing? What is the failure rate? What is the success rate? And so when we don't evaluate interventions, then it is difficult to understand the impact of these interventions and to understand how to best improve them. And so that's something I would challenge organizations such as the National Youth Council, the Ministry of Youth, the Department of Youth. Those are some of the things that they could just help with evaluation so that we learn lessons from the interventions that we're taking. And then therefore make informed decisions based on evidence as to why some interventions are working and why others are not working. Of course, I'm aware that these interventions come with political connotations, and politicians use it to get ahead, and it's always an easy carrot to dangle before young people to show that, oh look, we are doing this and this, when really we don't even know whether these interventions are working as they should and where we can improve on them. And so I think my challenge would just to be to tighten up that evaluation space, to just find out whether or not these interventions are working, and if they are, then great, maybe we can expand on them, but if they are not, how best we can improve them.
Billion, you come from Madari Republic, like you mentioned. Has that intervention worked there?
Partly yes, and partly no. I think one of the things that this pandemic has done to young people is humbled them. There are people who would never, sweep the road, sweep the streets. But now, when the kazi mtaani was the only option, they had to humble themselves and get there. So it is a good thing also, but on the flip side, this is Kenya, and there are a couple of times that young people from Mathare, especially the Mlango area, Mlango Kubwa area, have organized demonstrations because what was happening was not fair. There are people from other areas that were being, they were paying money so that they could be, included in the Kazi Mtani initiative. So they've just been some monkey businesses around it, but on a bigger picture, we've seen it has helped so many young people because, some of them say, I'm waiting for end week or end month to get my Kazi Mtani to pay my rent. So it has been able to help them, but I think it was a panic approach for the government. They were not sure of what to do with these young people. So it was a panic approach. I hope and wish that, along the way they would learn, and adjust some of the loose ends so that it fits and includes more people. But most importantly, I think we should do auditing of what has been happening, because it's just been a blanket plan and left in the hands of the administration. So if we're really serious about helping young people, let's do audit. Let's see if genuinely the people that were supposed to get these are the ones that are getting. We had issues with the Give Direct when the government was giving people money. I experienced one of the administration, having the list, in the list, the members of their family who are not even from Mathare. So let's do audit and do adjustments to some of these interventions that we're giving out.
Okay. I tell you, the one who brought this up. So what is the best way of dealing with it to tighten the situation?
For me, Trevor, I'm a bit optimistic. I wouldn't be pessimistic in terms of the government interventions of the ravages of COVID-19. And first, I think Kazi Mtaani was a well thought out idea, and we need to build on it. First, muddling through is actually even a policy that has been practiced across the world, and when you are dealing with such a pandemic, I think you have to initiate something, then you start building value on it. From that cue, I'm also aware that there is a national skills development project that is coming that specifically focuses on the young people who are going through, or rather who are undertaking the Kazi Mtaani program. And this particular initiative targets this particular cohorts that have been adopted into this particular program for the Kazi Mtaani, so that they can actually be equipped with the necessary skills to be able to to gain income and also to be productive in society. The skills include issues like skills in entrepreneurship, hairdressing, technical skills like masonry, carpentry, plumbing, and what have you. And for me, I think it will come in handy in terms of not just them being a bit sustaining their income in these pandemic times, but also for them being dynamic in terms of the productivity that they have for the society. That said, during this pandemic, also something else has come out, innovations that have to be attributed to the young people. And you know, they normally say that adversity is the mother of all inventions. There have been very serious inventions that have been launched by young people. You remember the weeding robot that was launched in Jomo Kenyatta University? Basically, that has actually been developed by young people to ensure that we have revolution in the agricultural sector. One other notable invention was the hand glove that had the capacity of changing visual sign language rather into audio, which I think it's one of its kind across the world that actually has been attributed to Kenyans, and not just Kenyans, but young people from this country who have been able to come up and are innovative enough and are using their skills to be able to change even the lives of all the people in the globe. That said, I think going forward, what governments need to do is actually to put more concentration and more resources to the hands of the young people. Yeah. That includes SMEs and startups to be able to actually sprout up the economy. You know, you realize that once we have the resources down here in Mashinani and in the hands of the majority of the people, then probably the trajectory of our economy will actually change.
Okay. All right, after a quick break here on Daybreak, when we come back, we talk about other issues that are still there. There's the BBI appeal, there's the Jubilee conceding defeat in terms of the by-elections going on. We'll talk about that from the young people's perspective, find out what their thoughts are in terms of the political scene. Yeah, let's take that quick break right now, and then we're back with more in just a bit.